join me in giving our typical warm Southwest Virginia greeting to His Excellency, the Honorable Tim M. Kaine, the 70th Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Welcome, Governor.
What a great group, and it's so nice to be here in Smith County at a park that I've camped in. I've stayed in the cabins up on the hill. We've picnicked here, and we've done events in this very room, and it's nice to be back. And I appreciate you all coming, because I know everybody in this room is busy, and there are probably a lot of things you could do tonight. But the fact that you come out to talk about transportation, an important issue, is a very important thing. Before I start, a couple of housekeeping things. It might have been announced already, but I've got two sets of state employees here who are very important. In the back, on this side, Constituent Services Office of State Government, which is the office that answers questions, email, phone, letter questions coming in from constituents. So if you've got a question that either you don't get answered tonight, or if I can't call on everybody, or if you want to ask a question but you don't want to ask it in front of the whole room, the Constituent Services Office can help track down any issue that you're wrestling with, and so feel free. And then in this side of the room, in the back, is an important part of state government, the Treasury. The Treasurer's Office does a number of things, but one of the things is they hold unclaimed property for state employees, for state residents. About 1 in 7 Virginians has some unclaimed property that the state's holding for you, and you may not even know about it. When I got elected governor, I went through the Treasury Office. They said, "Governor, do you have any unclaimed property?" I said, "I don't even know what that is." And they said, "Well, let's check." And they ran my information through the system and found out that the state had a $700 check for me that they had sent to an old address that had never arrived, and it was right before Christmas, so it worked out great. So 1 in 7 of you, if you go over here at the end of the night, you're going to walk away probably with a check coming to you in the mail. I did a town hall meeting in Whitfield a month ago, and Mayor Trent Cruz said, "Governor, you're right, I got a check. The state owes me 3 cents. So, I mean, I can't tell you it was $700, but anyway, you might check that out. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to spend about 20 minutes just kind of walking through the dimensions of the transportation challenge that Virginia faces, which is a challenge that is a statewide challenge, although it's different in different parts of the state. In some parts of the state, it's congestion. In some parts of the state, it's projects needed for economic development. In some parts, it's safety, paving unpaved roads that school buses drive over. So there's different aspects of it. Public transit is a huge need in many parts of Virginia. So there's different aspects of it. I'm going to walk over the need and what I propose that we do about it. I have called the legislature into a special session beginning June 23. And I thought, rather than call them in and let them come in and give them something the day they arrive, I thought I'll roll out a plan right now so that people can look at it for 6 weeks. If they can come up with an improvement, hey, that's great. But we need to have action. And so we ought to have something to dialogue and talk about, and hopefully we can, in dialogue, work our way to a solution that will take care of the best interests of the state. I acknowledge this is a tough time to talk about finding money for anything. Families are stretched, businesses are stretched, governments, local, are stretched, and so is the state. But what I do know is this: we can't grow our way out of an economic challenge with a declining infrastructure. We can't. We have to have a good infrastructure if we're going to be successful. And if we make some investments in transportation now, one of the great things about them is they run jobs. When you make transportation investments, you're putting people to work, which is something that can be helpful at this time. I want to also just make 2 other quick introductions, and I'll jump in. Pierce Homer, who's right here with me, is the Secretary of Transportation for the Commonwealth. And he got the headache job of the administration, I tell you. I don't know why he said yes, but he does a very good job, and I'm very glad to have Pierce here tonight. And then I know you all know Philip Puckett, State Senator, who is here. Please give Philip a round of applause. Philip is a great friend and has been with me much of the day in other events. And so I gave him an excused absence. He didn't need to hear my whole spiel, so he may have to leave a little bit early, but I'm glad that Philip is here and works so well on these issues. Okay, well, let's jump in. Couple of needs. First, maintenance needs. We have an aging system of roads in Virginia, and that's no surprise. Some are surprised to find out that Virginia has the 3rd largest state-maintained road system in the United States. And it is aging. In fact, we have 20,000 bridges in Virginia. And guess what the average age of a bridge in Virginia is?
20 years.
20, 30, 40, 47. It's 47 years old. Over those 20,000 bridges, that's the average. And when a bridge gets to be about 50, you've got to start planning to do replacement. And so the first maintenance challenge we have is it's big and it's getting older, and it's also getting bigger. Every time a local government approves a new set of subdivisions or roads, the state picks up the responsibility for maintaining. So we add about 250 miles, give or take, of subdivision roads to the system every year. So it keeps getting bigger and bigger. Costs have increased. Folks here, I'm sure, probably a number of you have at least some connection with the construction industry. The cost of materials has increased very significantly in the last few years because of intense competition with other nations that are building a lot. So while we've had a fairly low inflation rate up until recently in the United States for the last few years, that has not been the case for construction materials. So the materials have been going up. And then the revenues have been flat. We haven't significantly adjusted transportation revenues. We did a little bit of an adjustment last year that I'll talk about. But we hadn't done a significant adjustment of transportation revenues since 1986. So when you have relatively flat revenues, a growing system, an aging system, and costs going up, what you end up with is pressure. And what happens is the amount of money available for maintenance, for improvements, starts to decrease. In fact, we use money to maintain what we have, and that takes money away from the ability to put into new capacity. Next slide, this chart kind of gives you an indication of it. If you look at the chart in fiscal year 1988, 20 years ago, we were spending a little bit more on construction than we were on maintenance. If we don't act, if we don't do anything, look where we are by fiscal year 2019. The maintenance funding will have gone statewide to a very low level. The construction funding and the maintenance funding is almost all that the funding will do. So we'll have very little money to grow our system, even as our state is growing. We have a growing population because Virginia is a good state for business. The quality of education is strong. We generally get good marks for management and the quality of life that we have. And so if we do not fix this maintenance gap, eventually the need to maintain the system will take virtually all the money. Just so you'll know how we do the kind of accounting in transportation, the legislature has given the administration permission. When we don't have enough money for maintenance, we go into the construction budget and we take maintenance money out. And so that's why that construction money starts to decline so significantly, because the maintenance needs eventually will virtually take over all of the necessary expenses. Next slide. Let me talk about the statewide needs on this maintenance side. Maintenance isn't just about making sure that the roads and bridges don't collapse. I mean, I think we were all shocked when we saw this collapse of the interstate bridge into the Mississippi River this year, saw that on the news, because you would think that might happen somewhere else, but we wouldn't think that our infrastructure would be poorly maintained and would collapse. So that's part of what we need to do. But there's other safety issues. Over 1,000 Virginians died on the road last year, which is the biggest number of Virginians that have perished on the road since the days when we really didn't have stiff drunk driving laws. But now we're seeing the death toll on the roads creep back up. And while many of those deaths and accidents are because of poor driving, there's an awful lot of safety issues that affect it. If we do better safety climbing lanes, etc., on Interstate 81, then you have fewer accidents on Interstate 81. That takes money to do those investments. In addition, we see in congested areas a safety issue with emergency response times. The difference in getting an ambulance to somebody who's having a coronary, 5 minutes, difference between 5 minutes and 8 minutes is huge. And if an ambulance or emergency vehicle is stuck in traffic, can't get there, which is often the case in Northern Virginia or elsewhere, then you find that there's a significant safety effect. We need more options. We need more options to ease congestion. We need more, there are thousands of miles of unpaved roads in Virginia that school buses still travel on that we need to try to pave or improve their safety to protect our children. And those are needs that are statewide. One of the reasons I'm doing this town hall meeting tonight in Marion is some people talk about the transportation challenges if it's just a Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads thing. That's all the need. But there are many local officials here who know there are key projects in South Side and Southwest Virginia and elsewhere that have to be done. If I'm trying to do economic development to bring economic opportunities to a region, you never are able to do a deal without having to put some dollars on the table for an interchange, for rail access or something. And so we need to have dollars available if we're going to grow our economy. Next slide. This is just a quick version of how much money we have to basically sweep out of the transportation revenues, either because of declining revenues or this huge maintenance need. Or is this just reductions in revenue, not because of increased maintenance? Okay. We passed a bill last year, to very unpopular bill, I might add, that we repealed, to charge people these civil penalties for DUIs or reckless driving. Virginians said, wait a minute, we want to raise money for transportation, not that way. So we repealed that bill. But that took money out that we were going to spend on maintenance. There were 2 regional plans that were passed last year that the Supreme Court said you can't do it that way. If you want to raise revenue, you got to do it as a General Assembly, not as regions. You had to take that money out of the construction fund. And then some other reductions in revenue mean that over the next 6 years, the state's 6-year plan has had to be reduced by $1.1 billion. And that's taken an awful lot of projects off the books. And I'll show you that regionally when we get to the end, the projects that have had to come off the books because of reductions in revenue. Let's talk about an unpleasant topic, because if we're talking about raising money, I mean, that's never easy. We're talking about taxes and fees. So let me give you the kind of lay of the land about how we fund our system and taxes in Virginia. Virginia is the 5th highest per capita income in the nation. Now, obviously, there's regional disparities. It's not the same in every region, clearly. But among states, we have one of the highest per capita incomes, 12th highest population. The state and local tax burden in Virginia is 32nd in the nation. And the state and local tax burden as a percentage of income is 39th. And so we have a relatively high median income and a relatively low tax burden. And that means that there are challenges in trying to find revenues to do what we need to do. When it comes to the percentage of money that we devote to transportation, we're near the bottom. A couple of slides here will show this. There are 3 basic revenue sources that we use to fund transportation in Virginia. The gas tax, the sales tax on automobiles, and then the general sales tax, that 5% general sales tax. We use a portion of it for transportation. So let me tell you about where Virginia is. Motor vehicle sales tax. The average in the United States, the sales tax on this in Virginia is 5%. Anything except food and medicine. This would get a 5% attached to it, but food at a grocery store and medicine would not. But the sales tax on an auto in Virginia is 3%. So that is a way that all states raise money for transportation. Average 4.5%, we're at 3%. And you'll see that the blue states are ones where 3% or less. We're among the lowest states in the country when it comes to sales tax on auto. Next slide. The retail sales tax, the general sales tax, we're at 5%. And you'll see the U.S. average is 6%. The blue states are those where it's 5% or less. So we're one of the lowest sales taxes in the United States. We're right near Tennessee here, and I know you all know that they finance usually our sales tax or sales tax is significantly higher. And then finally, we missed one. We missed one. I think we missed gas tax. Keep going back, okay? Okay, so just stay right there. The gas tax slide isn't showing up, but the Virginia gas tax is 17.5 cents a gallon. It's been there since 1986. The average is about 8 cents a gallon higher than us. And the surrounding states tend to have gas taxes higher. I think Kentucky and Tennessee might be about where we are, maybe a little bit lower, but North Carolina, West Virginia, Maryland, DC have significantly higher gas taxes. So quickly, the 3 revenue sources that we use to fund transportation, sales tax, auto sales, and gas tax, are all significantly less than the national average. And the basic rule of math kind of applies. We can have a big system that is well funded. We can have a good system if we are willing to pay for a good system, or we can have a bad system if we want to pay for a bad system. But we can't have all the revenue sources below average and have a great system. We just can't do it. And this is the last slide. Highway spending is a percentage of income. Again, the blue states are the ones that don't spend much. We spend below 1.2%, with about 7 or 8 other states where most spend more. That is the reason we have the challenge that we have. Next. Okay, we'll jump ahead a couple now. Couple of things we do, because it's not all about money. It's not all about trying to find money. To solve the problem, we have to better match land use and transportation decisions. This is especially the case in suburban or fast-growing areas you don't want to have local governments making decisions to do certain things in land use and then the state doing transportation planning without a real good mesh and harmony. And that's been a problem in the past. The good news is that the legislature has supported a lot of efforts to really tie land use planning and transportation planning together in the last few years. So that's an important thing to do that's not about money, that we hadn't done so well on in the past, but we're starting to do better now. Next. The other thing is we've got to continually make sure we're doing our best on VDOT reform. When I became Lieutenant Governor in 2002, I have members of the Commonwealth Transportation Board and the VDOT folks here. Virginia's transportation agency in their projects were only on time about 20% of the time and on budget 50% of the time. That was just 6 years ago. And so we were not really using the dollars the best way possible to produce value for people. Today, the on-time percentage is 85% plus, and the on-budget percentage is 90% plus. So VDOT has done a tremendous job under the leadership of Pierce, Dave Eckern, the CTV, in getting more bang for the buck, being more efficient and more effective. And they've done it while they've reduced VDOT employment by nearly 2,000 people in the last 6 years. Again, the goal was, if we can reduce salary costs, we can take salary costs and put it into, road rail infrastructure. It's not easy to do because obviously people are helping you do the jobs, and so it's a challenge to do that. But we have made cuts in personnel, and we have done that to try to put more money into road rail infrastructure. Next slide. So I have a proposal, and the proposal basically has 3 pieces. It's safety first, this maintenance deficit in maintaining our system. It's regional relief for these 2 congested regions of the state, Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads, and then it's what I call transportation change. So let me jump in and talk about all 3 of those. First, safety first. I want to fix this maintenance deficit that we have. I want to have a system where we are not trying to raid construction funds and to do a minimal level of maintenance, but we're really maintaining the road system in the best way we can so that we know we're safe. And then if we do that in a reliable way and we don't raid the construction fund, then there will be more money for local projects to add new capacity in secondary roads, pave unpaved roads, etc. So that's where we start. Safety first, to promote safety, to repair aging infrastructure and bridges, and a need that is a really important one in Hampton Roads. We have a significant need to have appropriate evacuation routes because we know that there's going to be potential weather emergencies there. So how do I propose to fund it? Well, last year the legislature passed in this bill that got struck down by the Supreme Court. The legislature overwhelmingly voted for 2 revenue sources that I propose to use to fund maintenance. The first is to increase the sales tax on autos from 3 to 4%. So not to the 5% that is the sales tax on everything else, but just by 1%, from 3 to 4, we'd still be a half penny or more less than the national average. We do that. And second, we have a $10 addition to the annual registration fee that you pay when you register a vehicle. If we do those 2 things, we can fill in the maintenance deficit that we have statewide, maintain our roads and bridges in a good way, and not have to raid the construction funds the way we do right now. And I recognize that's an increase in those revenue sources, but again, if we're trying to find money for transportation, it strikes me that having a deep discount on the sales tax on autos doesn't make sense. And so that would be the basic proposal. If we do that, you'll see, I told you this maintenance deficit is what we have to rob out of the construction fund every year. If we don't act, the red line shows you where we go. The maintenance deficit in 2008 is about nearly 300 million. By 2009, it would be nearly 400 million. It grows to nearly $600 million by 2014 if we do not do something. If we put in place my proposal for the sales tax on autos, 1%, $10 registration, you see we don't have a deficit. By 2014, we might start to have a little bit of a deficit again, but it'll be like 30 million instead of 600 million. And so this will promote safety, and it will also mean that we won't have to raid amounts. So that's the first part of my proposal. And safety first is what we call it, because really that is our first obligation. Keep safe what we have. The second piece I'm not going to spend a lot of time on because it's really for Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads. And the idea is, in Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads, there would be regional taxes imposed there, and the money would stay there, to fund metro rail system. In Hampton Roads, there's 6 or 7 huge projects, usually crossing the water, crossing the James River or tunneling under, which are very, very expensive. And so the proposal of Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads is to have as a proposal that's been discussed in those areas, have a 1% regional sales tax throughout the region that the state would impose. Not on food, not on medicine, there wouldn't be another 1% on autos. The auto would just be 1%. But the idea would be that would fund enough in Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads to help them meet their congestion needs. The one thing I do want to say about it is, while this would be regional, the money would be imposed in the region and stay in the region, it is important to the state that Hampton Roads and Northern Virginia be strong, because they're the two most populous parts of the state. They produce the most tax revenue in the state, and the state allocates those tax revenues not just to Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads, but frankly, tax revenues get allocated around the state. So the schools in Southwest Virginia and worker retraining programs in Southside Virginia and public health systems in Richmond, Virginia get funded with a little bit of money out of Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads. It is in all of our interest to keep those regional economies strong and not have them choked off by congestion. Next slide. And the third piece is what I call a transportation change fund. In wrestling with what our challenges are going forward, I've kind of been struck by the fact that just doing more of what we've done probably isn't enough. We also have to think kind of differently about what we are doing and what we need to do. Our transportation future with gas at $4 a gallon is going to be very different than the way you plan transportation if gas was at $1.50, $1, or $2 a gallon. And so we need to kind of think about the future and plan for the future. And so what I believe is that we need to invest more significantly in Virginia in things like public transit, rail for freight, rail for passengers. We need to encourage more telecommuting. We have businesses that it's too expensive for them to expand to Northern Virginia, so they open up satellite facilities in Southside. If they have good telecommunications, they can hire workers in Martinsville to do the work that they would have to pay more for up in Nova. We ought to be spending money to create opportunities other than in the congested parts of the state. And so the way I propose that is through something called the Transportation Change Fund. How do I propose to fund it? Last year, as part of these regional packages that I mentioned, the legislature imposed what's called a grantor's tax in Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads. And a grantor's tax is this. Right now, if you sell a property in Virginia, you pay 10 cents for every $100 of the sales price into the state as a grantor's tax. That just goes into the general fund. Last year, the legislature put in a proposal to raise that by 40 cents. So it would be raising it to 50 cents per $100 just in Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads. I have proposed to make that a statewide tax, but knock it from 40 cents down to 25. That would raise about $140 million a year into this change fund that we could use, again, for public transit, for telecommuting, for rail, for freight rail, a whole series of options. I would spend 75% of that money for public transit or rail. I would spend 25% of it for economic development. I visited not long ago, I see Trent, you were with me when we visited the Gatorade plant up in Wythe. That was an economic development deal that Wythe participated in, Wytheville and the state. And part of what the state did is we put dollars in so that they could have better road and rail access at that plant. Every deal that we do now, we have to put money into road or rail access, it seems. So this Transportation Change Fund would provide a bigger sum of dollars that we could use to encourage economic development by creating transportation access. So those are the three pieces of the plan. Pretty straightforward. Solve the maintenance need. Do that first for safety reasons. Provide some opportunities for regional relief in the two most congested parts of the state. And then start to change the focus a little bit by focusing much more on rail, public transit, sort of economic development than just paving. We're not going to ever be able to just pave our way out of the challenges we have. We've got to look at some different strategies. If you do that Transportation Change Fund, you'll see that it dramatically expands transit and rail investments statewide. And as a whole, next slide, you'll see right there, I showed you how if we didn't do anything, by 2019 we would be having virtually no construction money, and the maintenance money would chew it all up. If we do something, the blue line is what we would have for construction. We would have a vigorous construction budget over the next decade and really be able to do a lot to add capacity to the system rather than have that money all dwindle. Finally, let me just mention, as I conclude, and then I'm going to open it up for questions, what's the effect on this part of the state? Recently, in April, the Commonwealth Transportation Board considered what is the 6-year plan for each of the transportation regions of Virginia. And here's what the board considered. There are a number of projects that have been on the drawing board to do in Southwest Virginia, but with the reduction of these funds by 40+%, the Commonwealth Transportation Board had to rewrite the plan to take a lot of projects off the list. So what you see, and you look here, this was the current 6-year plan. The projects on there, if they're in green, are projects that are still going to be running in the next 6 years. If there's some yellow, those are projects that will probably be done, but they'll be done much later than was the original plan. But you'll also see a lot of red dots. Those were projects that were on the 6-year plan that have been now taken off, that have been scrapped. They're not going to happen. If we do the proposal, if we put in place the plan that I mentioned, this changes, and you'll see the next line. A lot of the reds go to green. So there's still some reds. There's still some projects you're going to have a hard time. If you cycle back and forth, you will see that there's a lot more green if we put this plan in place. And let me just mention a couple of examples to you. Just pulled some regional examples. Improvements, these are projects that if we put my plan in place, we can do that otherwise we can't do. Improve Route 11 from exit 10 off I-81 to Route 611. I don't know if I have the Damascus folks here. This long planned effort to widen Route 58 near Damascus, that will go off the 6-year plan unless we can find more revenue. There's a Route 72 widening in Scott County that's been going on for some time. We can do phase 3 of that widening with new investments. If we don't, we have to. That's one of the red dots that comes off the list. Route 612 in Bland County and a couple of bridges need to be replaced. We can do that with new revenue. We can't without. And here in Smith County, there's a reconstruction of Route 658 and Route 660 that we can do in the 6-year plan if we put this in place and not if we don't. I have other examples as well, and I mentioned one earlier. If we fix this maintenance deficit, the amount of money we'll have to work with unpaved roads, pave them or improve safety on them, will more than double over the next 6 years, and that would be a good thing for safety in some of the rural parts of Virginia where there's still so many unpaved roads. So in any event, that's kind of my quick version. And again, that's a lot of facts that I'm pushing out to you, but I'll come back and just summarize. There's really 3 pieces of it, and then there's kind of an ask. The 3 pieces are: let's solve the maintenance deficit, safety first. Let's give these 2 congested regions tools that they need to raise money and keep money and do things they need to do. And let's change the paradigm a little bit by putting money for rail and public transit. If we do those 3 things, the Commonwealth will be stronger. We will be able in a tough economic time to say we're truly building our infrastructure and positioning ourselves for greater success. And we'll put people to work by doing it. So what's my ask? Well, I'm not just coming out here for my help. I am coming out for an ask. I'd love your support. And I didn't expect that I'm going to read this to you. You're all going to say, sure, we'll do it. But I would love your support as you think about it. And I would particularly love your support in telling legislators, look, I heard the governor made a good presentation. Legislators, please go and act. Don't go into Richmond for a special session with the spotlights on and everybody knowing there's a transportation problem and do nothing. If you can improve this plan, improve it, by all means. But at a minimum, don't leave empty-handed, because this is an issue that's been kicking around for a very long time, and it's really important for all of the Commonwealth that we take action, and that is why I come out tonight. With that, what I'll do is open it up for questions. This is primarily, really, a meeting about transportation, so I'm going to answer a lot of transportation questions. If you have 1 or 2 about other issues, I'll take them too. But I'm going to focus mostly on the transportation issue. But again, if you don't want to ask something in public, constituent services there can help you at the end.